Welcome to week 12 lecture, and this is our last lecture. And for this week, groups 16 and 17 made their presentations, and thank you group 16 and 17 members for your presentation. Let's start with last week's discussion questions, right? By groups 14 and 15, right? The first question by group 14 was about the soft masculinity that a lot of K-pop boy bands, they kind of deliver, this kind of soft manliness kind of image, right? Does this break the current stereotypes about men, how men should look or behave, or it creates another type of different types of stereotypes, right? Which is a very interesting question. And some of you pointed out that it definitely breaks traditional Western stereotypes of men, right? But at the same time, also some of you pointed out that it may create new stereotypes, right? Because soft masculinity becomes essentialized as Asian trait or Asian man trait, and fans may see it as belonging only to Korean men or Asian men, rather than, it can apply to different, it can apply to, men from different cultures, right? And also, but then, fandom can reshape meaning of the soft masculinity over time, right? And Tina pointed out that audiences can push soft masculinity beyond Korean context through global engagement and make it less culturally specific or more universal, right? Which is also a very valid point. And group 14 second question about the Korea Bull, is that a valid critique or fan shaming, right? Another very interesting question, right? So many of you said it's a gray area. Maybe both, right? This term can critique appropriation, like stealing some other people's culture without proper understanding, right? But it can get, this term gets overused as gatekeeping against genuine cultural interest, right? And also some of you also mentioned that labels fan broadly without distinguishing between disrespectful fetishization and respectful appropriation, right? So maybe this term can just lump everybody into, doing some sort of disrespectful fetishization, right? So we have to be cautious about it. And maybe this term can also discourages cultural exchange, right? And shaming new international fans can prevent meaningful learning, or it can contradict K-pop's mission for global exchange. And Ricky, Maria, and Lauren rightly pointed out, right? And also some of you also mentioned that this term reflects Western bias, which is a very valid point. Positioning Asian culture as something, exotic, foreign, right? That creates double standards where fans feel constantly judged despite respectful engagement, right? Which is a really, really good point. And group 15's question 1, what is the impact of BTS's Love Yourself message, right? So some pointed that it offers emotional comfort, and others, so Nicole mentioned that personal acceptance, BTS's own identity, and fan empowerment, self-love as foundation for helping others. So she pointed out there are two different interpretations possible, or many different, in fact, right? Because audience can interpret any message based on their own personal experience, or where they are in their life, what kind of experience they had, things like that, right? And another interesting point, it can individualize social problems, meaning that all these issues you can solve if you love yourself, right? All the responsibilities on you, right? But some, maybe it's just it's systematic, and it's structural. Maybe it's one individual may not be able to really overcome easily. Once I remember one economist, I cannot remember the economist's name, but he said, if you're born in like Korea, South Korea, or Canada, or any like kind of developed country, you already won a lottery, right? You are the smartest in the world, but you're born in like a less developed country, then going to school is really difficult. You have to work as a child. It doesn't matter how much you love yourself or how smart you are, what kind of talent you have. You don't even have any, opportunity to move along or, succeed in life, if you're born in a different kind of context or country, right? So, that said, there are some things in life you can overcome with your willpower or your effort or your talent, or your self-love, but there's some in some situations it's just impossible to overcome, right? So in the sense, it can, there's a small risk that this message can individualize social problems, right? It's individuals, it's up to you, right? And also, we talked about neoliberalism. Maybe we didn't in this class, but you heard of this term neoliberalism. That message is like, oh, we don't need any government intervention, blah, blah, blah. But in the essence, it's like all the problems, you have to solve it as an individual. It's not any government can help you or solve any issues for you, right? You're the one who develop your abilities and, whatever, and become a better or more, become a person who can make more profit, right? More profitable person. And the same message it has that, like, it's your responsibility. Something goes wrong, it's all your fault. Okay. And also Tina and Danielle pointed out that this message is meaningful, but it can be complex, right? Okay, and group 15's second question, explaining K-pop beyond K-pop fandom beyond the stereotypes, right? Maybe we should kind of look at emotional connection over their consumption, right? Fandoms involve storytelling. Also, they create community and they are involved in critical engagement, like some social movement and stuff. So they are not just doing superficial celebratory worshipping, right? So we have to look at what they do from many different angles, right? And fans sometimes feel pressure to justify their interest in, their idols due to stereotypes, unfair gatekeeping, compared to other music genre. So if you are a fan of K-pop, you have to maybe prove that your fandom must be justified because it's not like more like a Western pop. If you're a fan of like a Western popular music, you don't have same level of pressure to justify your interest, right? Which is a really good point. And we have talked about this point throughout the semester. Fandoms are not passive, right? They do a lot of things. So they're very active, right? Okay, so this week's groups 16 and 17 made their presentations. We're kind of coming back to fandom again in a person, because it's all industry. We involve people, right? Idols are people, consumers are people, right? So group 16 presentation focused on K-pop as identity and cultural bridge, and especially for the immigrant population, right? And group 17, group 17's presentation, focus on K-pop as participatory and imagined globalization, right? So we are focusing on this fans and their experience, their identity, and in relation to globalization. Okay, let's move to group 16's three key arguments. So group 16's first argument is the K-pop helps diasporic youth rediscover cultural identity, right? And they might be somewhat distanced because they're so busy to assimilate to the mainstream culture, and they don't want to look different. But then if they find K-pop, discover K-pop, and that can help them to kind of reconnect to their ethnic culture identity, right? And the second argument is K-pop's visual and emotional appeal enables global engagement beyond language. So it is not only the language, right, that K-pop is so appealing to a lot of people. Its visual and emotional appeal, that of course are a huge part of it, right? And the last argument is K-pop functions as a cultural bridge, shaping hybrid identities, which is a really interesting point too, right? And the discussion questions by Group 16, the first one is K-pop globalization real culture integration or just cultural output, right? So it's an interesting question to think about, and K-pop is enjoyed all over the world, pretty much, right? Fans from many different countries, enjoy K-pop, right, and participate in the fandom too, right? But at the same time, the most of the production still happens in Korea. But though, production, maybe physical location is in Korea, but the talent they use is very global, right? They will use any composer or any talent all over the world if they think that they are good, right? So but still, we can ask, is culture really shared equally though, right? Or is it still being exported from one center to other parts of the world, right? When you talk about this cultural movement, right, it's very hard to find any examples when culture is shared equally, right? When you think of like dominance of Hollywood films, right? Does Americans watch any like foreign films that much? As much as other, non-Americans watch Hollywood films, right? So it's very, this kind of cultural flows or cultural, exchange. We cannot really think of any equal sharing or equal exchange, right? And the second question, if you are a child of an immigrant family, how would you explore your cultural identity, right? Very interesting question. Group 16's presentation showed many diasporic youth from Korea with Korean ethnic background use K-pop to reconnect with their roots, right? So I wonder if you're from, different, your parents are from different culture, and you have some, other than Canadian culture, whatever that is, you are familiar with other different cultures, right? How would you explore your cultural identity? Do you use any cultural product from that culture to explore? Do you try to maintain the language if it's different from English, or how do you do so, or do you don't care about it at all? You just you don't feel like you need to, right? Actually, there are some people like that too. We're not talking about anyways are wrong or right? But if you try to explore your cultural identity, how do you do so, right? Okay, so based on Group 16's presentation, right? The diaspora is not about just physically moving from one country to another, right? Oftentimes it is about living in between two different cultures, right? So, for example, a Korean Canadian student may speak English at school, but listen to K-pop and connect to the Korean culture online, right? So this creates what we call an in-between space. And also identity is not just automatic, right? Oh, you're born, your parents are from Korea, so your identity is just Korean, or you're born in Canada, so you're just automatically Canadian, right? So So as we saw in Group 16's example, students did not always feel connected to Korean culture, but over time, through K-pop, if they discover K-pop, they develop that connection, right? And also it can be only just K-pop, listening to K-pop, but other cultural product as well. Or sometimes they make a friend, who are more familiar with Korean culture, then, they're influenced by, that friendship too, right? So, kind of, if you're a fan of K-pop, you will do some participatory action, right? If you keep doing this, those like repeated actions help build some sort of identity, right? So, we can say that identity is something we do. It's not something simply we are or we have, right? So by what you do, your identity also is not really fixed. It can kind of, can have different, aspect of it, different element of it, different flavor of it, right? So what we do now, it kind of shapes our identity, right? Okay, so let's move on to Group 17's 3 key arguments, right? And the first argument is fans actively participate in globalization or K-pop globalization, right? So we talked about this a lot. They are not passive. They are very active, right? Not all fans are very active, but some active ones are really, really active, right? And the second argument they chose is fans imagine a more inclusive, cosmopolitan globalization, right? By challenging this Western-centered, like kind of, globalization, right? And Group 17 questioned why Western artists are seen as authentic, while K-pop artists are often criticized as like, appropriating Black music culture, for example, in similar conditions, meaning that when Western artists and Korean, artists, they do very similar things, borrowing from, hip-hop, for example, genre, like a white Western artist. They do the same thing, but then why the Korean, the K-pop idols are more criticized, right? That's interesting question. We have to think about it, right? And the last point was cuteness personalizes and softens globalization, right? So as Group 17 explained, fans feel emotional closeness to idols. This cuteness kind of helps in that. So for example, idols are seen as friendly and approachable because this cuteness, they have this cuteness in it, right? Not that, distant, right? Okay, so let's move on to the discussion questions. The first one, the first discussion question asked whether this experience is specific to Canada, right? How would this study differ in other contexts like US, Middle East, Latin America, other diaspora, right? Is hybridity specific to Canada? So because the reading they read about the Canadian case study, right? So, this question is interesting to think about, but, it's hard to answer because maybe we're not really familiar with what's happening in US or Middle East or Latin America, right? So maybe if the question is framed that like, this hybridity in Canada, you're from not from Korea, but you're from other, countries, and how this hybridity works. Of course, the K-pop is not going to be involved in that question, but we can at least kind of draw from our own experience because it's still about Canada, but we have different cultures in Canada, right? Okay. And the second question, what does unequal criticism of K-pop versus Western artists reveal about cultural bias and authenticity? We just also talked about it, but what an important question to ask, right? As Group 17 explained, Western artists use similar production systems as K-pop idols, but then K-pop idols are, more harshly criticized, right? So why is K-pop often seen as less authentic, right? They, nowadays, it's not just composed by Korean composers, or it's not like their dance move is not just made by only Korean choreographer, right? So they may use just black artists like to make their music. They do, right? If these artists are really well known and really great. So even though that behind the production, the talent is from the original culture, if K-pop idols perform, they criticize it's less authentic, right? So it's not about the quality of music itself, or it's not about their dance move is less authentic, or their singing is less authentic. It's who they are, right? Right? If the same exact thing happened to like a Western artist, right, who are not from the hip hop culture, right, then the criticism must be much less, right? So this is a matter of power, like it's not a matter of the quality of music itself. It's a very interesting question to think about, right? Okay. So I want to just continue on talking about the power issue, right? As Group 17 showed, there are tensions in globalization. For example, some fans challenge Western dominance in global music. At the same time, they also challenge Korean fans who claim ownership of K-pop. Right? This shows that globalization is not that simple, and it involves negotiation between different groups, right? And the idea of cute globalization, about that, K-pop idols are often seen as soft, friendly, and emotionally accessible because they have this cuteness in it, right? And this creates strong emotional connection, but this also has some limits, right? Maybe that cuteness can be seen, too different, or too, and kind of, that cuteness can be used to stereotype this, K-pop artist, right? So, this image can hide also industry realities, right? It looks very cute, soft, accessible, all that good stuff, but behind this, maybe any negative, side of the industry cannot be easily revealed because everything looks so soft and cute and accessible, right? So, K-pop globalization is both positive and also complex, right? Okay, so in conclusion for today's lecture, the both groups' presentations help us understand K-pop in a deeper way, right? As Group 16 showed, K-pop shapes identity, especially for diasporic youth, right? It also allows people to feel reconnected, and confident in their own, in their cultural background, right? And even though you're not from Korea, from your narrative essay project, some, from Asia, like your background is from Asia, not from Korea specifically, but when you saw like a BTS making really big on the global stage, you feel like it gives a chance to think about the Asian culture in general, right? That you're part of. And Group 17 showed globalization is not just something we receive passively, and fans actively participate, translate, and reshape K-pop. And at the same time, this globalization process is not equal or simple, right? There are a lot of tensions, right, between Western and non-Western culture, which culture is seen as more, universal and things like that. And depending on that view, right, the same act can be seen more, it's less legit, right? And then about, between national ownership and global participation too, right? So K-pop is not just global music. It is lived global culture where identity, power, and participation all come together, right? So this is it for today's lecture. And for the final project, right, you have to submit your oral presentation showing the result of, like your, it's a research project. So what the project was about, and what you did and what you found, right? That presentation. It's like a written report, but it's replacement of written report. You are doing it an oral presentation, right? Doing it as an oral presentation. So sorry about the length confusion. So make it 10 minutes plus minus 1 minute, so 9 to 11 minutes. And please submit a YouTube link, right? And along with your YouTube link of the presentation, submit bunch of files, right? You can upload the files, right? That's like supporting documents, meeting notes, or research data. What kind of interview questions you use, interview transcripts, and if you did some websites, a fan website analysis, then screenshots of the website, or whatever you collected for data, right? You cannot just do research without collecting any data. It can be asking people questions, or it can be some doing some document review or website review, things like that, right? So categorize them into same category and upload the files, right? Oh, these are all interview questions together, transcripts together, screenshots together, things like that, right? And you submit those files when you submit your YouTube link, right? Okay, and this is our last lecture. And it's such a cliche to say, but it's already, time flies and it's the last meeting. But I really want to thank you for your participation and, submitting your group presentations in time, most of you. And that's, very an important part of the whole semester. And you played an important role in making this course, right? So thank you. And other, project like your reaction video, maybe most of you are doing it for the first time. I bet it was awkward, right? But still, thank you so much for trying, doing a new thing like that. And your final project, you're maybe working hard to kind of finish. But thank you for all your hard work, and I wish you the best in life, right? And the rest of the studies at York and beyond. And if you need my assistant in the future, please feel free to contact me, okay? Thank you all.